Hello everybody, and welcome to a series I'm calling Path to Plat. The idea behind this series is that I, as an unranked player, am going to be attempting to learn to the point where I reach the rank of Platinum. There's going to be a lot of mistakes along the way, and that's exactly what I'm trying to showcase. And I'm hoping it'll be both informative and entertaining for those of you that watch. If you notice mistakes that I don't, feel free to let me know. It only helps me along my way. And if you don't understand plays I make or why a particular play was a mistake, go ahead and let me know as well, and I'll do my best to explain, because I want to help any of you that are trying to go along the same journey along that journey as well. And if you just want to watch and be entertained, well, I'm very happy to have you here along the journey with me, and I hope you enjoy. So I did say in the last video that I was going to play something I was a little less comfortable with, but I think I'm actually going to wait to build another deck that's currently on the top of the meta right now. Instead, I'm going to play a control deck that I have played quite a bit. This was one of the first net decks that I built. It is the Lysandra Trundle Watcher combo. I am a huge fan of this deck. It's a control combo deck where essentially your entire goal is through Lysandra. She gives you a Watcher when she levels up here, which what that does is essentially if you have the opportunity to attack with it on the next turn, your opponent loses because they will not have any cards unless they can shuffle anything into their deck. So it's really about getting that out and getting to swing with it. There's a lot of different ways that you can enable that. There is the basic way of its text here of when you summon 4+ allies that cost 8 or more, being able to do that, which there's a couple different ways to do that because it is summoned and not played. So you can do things like with Spectral Matron, where if you do this on another 8-drop, that's 2 right there. There's also Trundle, who gives you, which is why he's in this deck, who gives you Ice Pillar, which refills 8 of your mana. So there's the combo there of fitting all of those together. Aside from that, the vast majority of this deck is removal and heal and things to help you sustain and whittle down your opponent while you just wait to be able to pull off your combo. Without further ado, let's just go ahead and hop into some games with it. So right off the bat here, I make one of the cardinal sins of playing control. I'm not considering the matchup, and I mulligan away some of my removal when I'm playing against an aggro deck, when I really should have kept that. The flash freeze is nice, but I was thinking more about my combo, when in reality I should have been focused on just removing his stuff and running him out cards until I can draw my combo. So here I act a little hastily, and I drop my Avarosian Sentry in order to block. What I could have done instead was play my Ice Shard, which would have killed the rear guard. My Sentry was going to die anyway just because of what MF does, and then if I had Frostbitten the MF instead, I would have blocked the exact same 6 damage, only taking the 3 from her ability and the 2/3. So I would have saved myself the same, I would have actually removed the rear guard, and I wouldn't have wasted my Avarosian Sentry. Furthermore, if I had played my Ice Shard on the last turn, an Avalanche here would have killed both of these, removing some fairly decent-sized threat, including his MF from the board. So it really was the play that I should have gone with, because I'm unable to remove them on my turn here, meaning that he's essentially just going to get another attack with them. In this game, I make pretty much the same mulligan mistake in the opposite direction. I'm playing against another combo deck here, and I mulligan away a combo piece for looking for mitigation that probably won't even remove his bigger stuff that he's going to end up playing anyway. And it's really something that for some reason I struggled with on these first couple games, was really considering the matchup that I was up against. I'm going to blame this mistake that I repeatedly made on the fact that I kept playing aggro, because I think of what I'm doing here as value swinging, when in reality, I have an alternate win condition. There's no reason for me to be swinging. I don't really need to be removing his board this way because I have other things in hand that can do the same thing. All I'm doing is robbing myself of potential blockers. This one I think might have been born from a little bit of tilt or frustration, because if you notice, he has no mana, he just swung, he has pretty much what are both of his combo pieces on the board with Shen and Jarvan. I played my Lysandra, I had 9 mana, I could have Avalanche twice, which would have killed everything except for Shen, and then on the next turn I could have Withering Wailed or something else, found some other way to remove that Shen, but at the very least that would have been 2 of the 3 things on his board completely gone. That wouldn't have bothered me. The ending of this game really highlights why it's important not to take for granted that you've won. I have my Watcher on board, and I swing with it, destroying his deck, and I think that I've won here. But the fact that he blocks with his Jarvan and even protects it with Barrier and Lifesteal should have been a little bit of an indicator to me that things aren't quite right. Although at this point, there wasn't a lot I could have done. If I had Withering Wailed here, not knowing what else was in his hand, that probably would have been the correct play. I chose not to because I thought it didn't matter, because he wasn't going to kill my Watcher, and I thought he was just going to end the turn and die. But he ends up playing Golden Aegis, which rallies him and puts Barrier on his Shen, and this puts me in a really tough spot. I Withering Wail beforehand, and perhaps if I had had time, if he was maybe going to play something before he swung, I could have used my Avalanche and cleared all of them, but I couldn't take that for granted, because if he just swung immediately after I played my Withering Wail, then I still would have lost. And that really was the gamble here, and why I probably should have tried to remove that Shen earlier in the game. In this game, I make the mistake of thinking that good tempo plays are always good tempo plays. I play my Trundle on turn 5, which, with a smaller board, and if he didn't have an exact counter to it with that 5-4 Challenger, would have been a really good play, because he's part of my combo and he's also a good value swinger and a good blocker because of his regeneration. But I'm going into turn 6. I have a Ruination in hand, and if I had kept at least 3 mana, that meant that I would have been able to completely clear his board, which I now can't do. And then he immediately removes my Trundle anyway with the Cataclysm, meaning I practically wasted that mana because I don't get any value out of him, and all I did was add the Ice Pillar to my hand. This game was when I think I really started hitting my stride with this deck. I show a little bit of patience and restraint here, knowing that I got this Ice Shard in hand, and he's got a lot of stuff with 1 health on it. So I'm just going to wait for him to swing, which he does, and then I can just remove it with my Ice Shard. And if I had seen anything with 2 health, maybe I would have used my Avalanche instead, but I was really rewarded for my patience here. I do still make a handful of mistakes in this game, and this is one of the bigger ones. I let him kill this instead of using my Ice Shard to just clear the entire board, including that, which allows him to draw 2. And this is a deck with Nasus in it, so that's just adding 1 more to Nasus's counter. And there really wasn't a better time for me to have played my Ice Shard than that. I'm not entirely certain why I made the choice that I did on this turn. I should have played my Spectral Matron as soon as I saw him play the Nasus, summoning my Watcher, because the Watcher currently as it stands would have killed the Nasus. And even if it didn't, I could have used my 3 Sisters to Frostbite it, or I could have even blocked it with the Spectral Matron from the get-go and then used the Frostbite to block there. It wasn't really important. The more important thing was that this would have enabled my combo, and it would have allowed me to make absolutely certain that I wasn't going to take any damage. But instead, I end up wasting a little bit more mana here just to entomb him, when I even honestly at this point could have frostbitten him. There wasn't any point to even do that. I think that there were quite a few misplays and wasted mana that I made on this turn. This game is what I think is against a mirror match at this point, because it has both Lysandra and Trundle, although it is a slightly different deck. What I do first is the absolutely correct choice, which is I mulligan away some of my control, looking for more of my combo pieces, because if it is a mirror match, what I need to do is get my combo first. The first of us to reach our combo is the one who wins. And what's really even better, though, is despite the fact that I got a really good mulligan because I have almost my entire combo, including an entreat at this point, I play my entreat and I get my Trundle. And I now at this point have pretty much my entire combo in hand, because I even have what I need to summon the Spectral Matron. It was a little difficult for me to make mistakes in this game simply because of the really good draw and curve that I had with it, but I did make one here. I shouldn't have killed his Avarosan Sentry, and I shouldn't have blocked with my Trundle. What I should have done instead was use my 3 Sisters to Frostbite the Trundle so that I didn't take damage from it, and then use my Catalyst of Eons to heal up 3 of the 4 damage that I would have been down at this point, and then I would have gone into the next turn with 8 mana. I could have played my Ice Pillar, used my Fading Memories on it, and then Spectral Matron that copy of it. And then going into the next turn, I could have played my last Ice Pillar and then my Lysandra, and that would have been the 4 to make the Watcher that she gave me cost 0 for the turn after that to pretty much immediately swing and win. I have 3 notes across my timeline for this game saying you should have avalanched here. I think it's really funny because this is the only one where I say you shouldn't have avalanched here. My opponent has 6 mana remaining at the end of this here, and I avalanche instead, even though he has more than enough to fill up his board again. And this really sets me up for a point here where he actually, I believe, Black Spears my Trundle, and I end up losing him. So if I hadn't avalanched at all, I wouldn't have lost the Trundle, and I could have just saved it for the next turn. In fact, I could have just played Blighted Ravine instead and potentially just made him wait for the next one. Although I tend to prefer to play Blighted Ravine on my turn, just so that I have that extra time to play a slow spell or another unit or something before they attack on their turn. So right here I make another big mistake as a control deck. My opponent just passes the turn to me to end the round, and instead of letting him do that, I get greedy. I play my Trundle. I go, I don't want to waste this mana, when I really should have just let him waste that mana, because I'm at this point just waiting for my combo pieces. There's nothing for me to do here. I should have just let him waste that mana, and I end up losing another Trundle, and then he plays units, and then he swings with them. So I was really punished pretty badly for being greedy here. This last one's a case of me being a little too hasty to make my plays. My opponent tries to atrocity what I'm about to kill here to make sure it doesn't go to waste, and my first thought is to frostbite it, and then I realize as I'm looking at it that I'm not entirely certain if that's how atrocity works. So I exit out and I check atrocity, and it does say power, and then before being as slow and careful again, I select Entomb by accident, and that's 2 mana that I didn't need to waste because this was going to die anyway. And that 2 mana could have gone to a Withering Wail, it could have gone to an Avalanche. It ended up not being too big of a problem just because my opponent only had 2 mana at this point, but it could have mattered in a different game, and it's really important to make sure that those things are highlighted. This right here is my last "you should have avalanched" marker, and it was something that I think probably was a little difficult to predict in the game, but I did know that my opponent had a Callista, which I'm not certain if it's what's in his hand right now or if it's what he plays next turn, but if I had removed this Mistwraith from the board, the Callista would have had only 2 other things on board. So it would have been a little bit easier to deal with. I wouldn't have been able to remove her quite as easily, but I did still have a 3 Sisters that I could have used to frostbite her and clear her off that way, because as long as she wasn't leveled up, she wouldn't have summoned the Ephemeral to take the damage for her. Alright, so that's just about everything that I have for today. It was a really interesting swing going from playing quite a bit of aggro, both inside the lab and against other players, to playing a control deck like this. I definitely stumbled over my feet at first a little bit with it, but once I got my bearings and I got used to it again, I remembered exactly why I like this deck as much as I do, because it has a lot of that outplay and combo potential, as the name would suggest, where your opponent can just start dropping things and you can just clear it off the board one after another. And it could be definitely, you can see how it would be frustrating from the other side, but it's also very rewarding and nice to see from your own side. But anyway, if you enjoyed what you saw, go ahead and drop a like and a subscribe. I intend on putting out quite a bit more. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave those, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Okay. All right. Go play it, man.